First and foremost, give Mandy Moore her Emmy immediately. Thank you, Television Academy. The woman's performance in this episode was so good. Hey y'all, today we're talking about episode 5 of season 6 of This Is Us, which was titled Heart and Soul. This is easily the funniest episode that This Is Us has had in quite some time. Obviously, like, this show has so much humor in it, as much as it has grief and depth and complexity and tragedy. It has these really, really light sides too. This episode really just had a lot going for it that I really, really, really personally loved. There was just so much meta talk about Kevin's love interest, which got brought up quite a bit this episode. There was like a little bit of kind of a Sophie or Madison dichotomy there of like, whose side are you on? And of course Cassidy was thrown in the mix, which we'll get to in a little bit, but I kind of loved that little meta discussion. Then of course we had what might be our last version of worst case scenario game, which Randall and Beth obviously have played throughout this series. There's been so much of that is so defining of them as a couple. It is my favorite thing when they discuss these things. I love how this episode too, as much as it tries to be typical network television sometimes and dangle little like cliffhangers in front of us, or the promos being a little bit of a cheap shot, they throw out right away in the writing of this episode that Deja could be pregnant, and they throw out all of these things to where it's like, okay, it's actually ridiculous that we think these things. And obviously what ends up being the situation of Deja wanting to move in with Malik, it's not necessarily worst case scenario, but it ends up being a lot more serious than any of those other things, because ultimately any of them could have been worst case scenario. It's whichever one ends up being real as the worst case scenario. I just love the little inclusion of that in this game, and that I guess will just transition me straight to Randall and Deja. I love that Randall and Deja has the relationship they have. I also really love, as somebody who worries about fictional characters, I love that we know that they're going to be okay in the future, that Deja is going to be okay and on the right path in the future, because there's just something about right now knowing there's turmoil in their relationship. It's very hard to watch. What I wrote in my notes for this episode is that I feel like Deja is Randall in an alternate life. And obviously that's not like a deep cut or a deep take or anything really. It's just sort of that I see Deja as being strong in the areas that Randall wasn't. Randall stayed home for college to take care of his mother. He felt a lot of guilt about being away and taking care of her, and everything worked out kind of perfectly for him and Beth of when they met and how they were together. And here Deja is having a little bit of a tweaked different situation than Randall, and having there be so much connection between them. And I don't know, honestly, Deja making some fair points, being like, I've lived a lot in my 17 years and you always say I'm mature for my age and this is what I think is best for me. But also Randall being an adult, knowing like, hey, this may not work out forever and you don't want to throw away or hinge your entire future on this. But then even Malik in their conversation on the stoop saying like, hey man, like, I'm gonna not say these things because I think you're acting a little childish right now, and I respect that you don't necessarily want Deja to do this, but you're asking me to break up with a girl I love because you think that's what's best for her, and that is ultimately gonna ruin your relationship. And so I kind of love how at this point in Randall and Deja's relationship and their stories, that's kind of where the focus is. But I also like that we got to see Tess and Annie too, because we've seen some issues with Tess and Beth more in the past, but poor Annie gets kind of left out. And I liked kind of the joke of like the knock knock jokes being like, we don't even know what Annie's interested in, like we just know her as the sweet little Pearson child that she is. So I really like where that storyline is going. I just have to lay that on the table. I think it's so good, and I loved kind of the sister dynamic between Randall's 3 daughters. I really loved them, and then his relationship with Beth. They're just 2 of my favorite characters in this entire show, just because of the way that they work together and go off of each other, and how this season we've really gotten to see them be challenged in maybe Randall, who always seems like the reasonable one, always the rational one of the big 3, always has his life together. He's maybe not making the best choices for once, and I think that's something that ultimately him and Beth are gonna have to figure out. But the care and craft that's being put in that storyline is so good. Then we had the Kevin and the Cassidy and the Nikki and the Edie and the cabin. I love that we're getting to see the cabin be built. I love that Kevin is dealing with Elijah and Madison's relationship, and I think the call that he makes to him, or that Elijah makes to Kevin at the end of the episode, was so touching because he does know Madison, and he does in some way love Madison. He just doesn't see her as his romantic love or love her in that sense, but he's learning to be mature. He's finding the best and healthiest way to do that. Now, of course, the promo had to just ruin that and say, oh, Madison doesn't want the kids to go home for Thanksgiving to Pennsylvania. She wants them in LA, and like that's gonna cause some drama. But I think what I like is Kevin's acceptance of Madison moving on is sort of how the audience is then allowed to feel, is like if he's okay with it and he's being gonna be supportive of Elijah, then that's going to be good. And I also love the fact that Elijah obviously loves Kevin's kids. I see them being good friends in the future if stuff does progress with Madison and Elijah. Or Eli, I don't know what his name is, I'm sorry. Then I loved the conversation that Cassidy had with him of kind of like, hey dude, this is not some great rom-com that you have in your head. Like, this is not going somewhere just because we met at this dark time in our life and we both have kids. Like, she just lays everything out very plainly, emotions absent, which I think is something that Kevin has not had, especially in terms of his loves. And what he needs is someone like Cassidy to be logical to him. Not saying that they should be together, I have different takes on that, but that I feel like Kevin just needs somebody to plainly lay it out for him. And I feel like the show is like laying out for us very gently but in a very intelligent way, hey, these people, not the one for Kevin. So the fact that I feel like Cassidy has effectively been ruled out at this point, and for the most part, I feel like Madison has too. Who does that leave? Especially because Zoe doesn't want kids, and I don't think her and Kevin are gonna get together. That leaves one obvious choice, because at this point, I am still very firmly of the belief that This Is Us cannot introduce a new character for us to love enough for Kevin to be with. And who was in the promo for the past storyline, and that is Sophie. I think we saw Sophie in the Challenger episode. I already brought that up in that review. We're seeing her in the, like, one of the next episodes that we get after the hiatus of the show, which right when it gets good, hiatus. In typical This Is Us fashion. It makes me sad. But we're seeing Sophie. And so that kind of is like, how can you continue to bring up? Because at this point, they could very easily rewrite the past to just sort of leave Sophie out of it. And that's what I thought they would do after Kevin and Sophie officially ended it the second time in the show. But no, they keep bringing Sophie back. And that is why, and I've been saying this, Sophie and Kevin are going to end up together. They're going to end up together. And I just fully, wholeheartedly believe that. And if I'm wrong, I will sit here with the pie on my face and or the egg on my face, whatever that expression is, and admit it to you guys. But I just think they're going to be together. Also in that storyline, Nikki and Edie, so cute. They were watching Crazy Stupid Love. At 24 minutes, you can hear, it's like you're photoshopped. So that should tell you how many times I've watched the movie and how much I love that movie. But I think the real heart of this episode was the Kate and Rebecca storyline. I will say with Rebecca's speed dating, I kind of loved how we're able to see her friendship with Miguel and how much they leaned on each other in the grief process. That to me is almost better than seeing the beginning of their courtship, like when they eventually dated and got married, because I feel like there's just something so real and sweet, and that is kind of where the foundation of their relationship is in their connection to Jack and how they leaned on one another, and less like the romantic stuff comes later, but I'm more interested in that, so I loved getting to see that. I feel like with Kate and Rebecca, any mother-daughter pairing duo can really kind of relate to that difficulty of forming a relationship, sometimes feeling like it's never going to be good, or it's really hard, or you're fighting, or like that's still your best friend at the end of the day. And like, I think that's something that no matter whether you have a great relationship with your mom or a really poor relationship with your mom, that you can relate to, and the show just absolutely nails it. And seeing the montage between Kate and Rebecca at the beginning of the episode playing piano and doing it at the end of the episode, but teaching it to Jack, and how like all of their love of music is going to be passed along into Jack Pearson. And how perfect is it that Rebecca's dream was to be a singer, and she met Jack Pearson, and now Jack, well, I guess is whatever Jack's last name is, that Jack is now getting all of those dreams of these two women who lived together after the grief of the loss of Jack Pearson. Their love and hope and dreams for music and the pursuit of that is going to be passed into little baby Jack. And that was just so precious and sweet. I don't know. This show is just so important to me. I will not end this with yet another sappy love letter. I will write a love letter for the show when it is close to ending. But as I said before, it's going to be about 3 weeks before we get a new episode. So this is going to be my last review for this show until it returns after the Olympics. Thank you so much for watching this episode. Please be sure to let me know in the comments down below what you thought of the episode. Be sure to like this video if you liked it and consider subscribing so when I do come back February 22nd with more This Is Us reviews, you can watch them, or you could just catch all my other movie and TV related content in the meantime. Thank you guys so much again for watching. Have an absolutely amazing night, and I will see you in my very next video. Bye, y'all.